session. I think we've got a lot out of it. I don't think we need to make any specific recommendations as a result of what we've heard this evening, cabinet member interview. But depending on a lot of other circumstances, I think it would be a good idea for this particular scrutiny commission to keep a close eye on that particular part of the council's really important work. But I'll move on now to the agenda item on the Housing Scrutiny Commission scrutiny of housing repairs. Oh, my mouth's a bit full up with chocolate biscuits now. So hopefully everybody has had a chance to read the draft report. Now, big health warning, as you can see, is plastered all over the front of the report, which is that as a result of the general election, we weren't able to send out the survey to residents. That is obviously a key part of our evidence gathering for this scrutiny commission. Yeah. We weren't able to do that before the election for related reasons, and we sent it out immediately afterwards. So that's obviously truncated the period. Instead of delaying the entire report, I wanted to draft what I could based on the evidence gathered so far, and give you this report in two sections, because I think otherwise we would have been delayed too much with regard to our work programme. So what you have in front of you is the report minus the repair stuff, minus also some contributions from Tenants Council as well, because I'm still waiting for those to come in writing. But once we have those two pieces of information, both of which I think will come in relatively quickly, then we will have a full set of reports. So at the moment there are 8 recommendations based on the evidence that's been gathered so far, and I just wanted to very quickly go through some of those. Some of them are a lot more self-explanatory than others. The first is the most important, I think, because that's the strategic one that has far-reaching consequences. In the formal interviews, the informal interviews, all of the evidence we collected, I was struck by how many times we were told that the council was asking SBS to do something, and actually it was proving a bit tricky, and we were needing to persuade SBS. And actually the message that's been given out to Southwark more generally is that we've brought this service back in-house, that we directly control this service. And the main advantage of bringing something back in-house is that you do have that direct management control apart from anything else. And it just seems like we're still asking pretty please for certain things to happen, and they are not happening clearly. And so the recommendation is to dismantle that structure and properly take direct management control in precisely the same way that Islington have done, and that they've reaped the benefits from that. If people have got comments on these recommendations as I go, stick your hand up and I'll bring you in. Dawn.
Yeah. Sorry. So have we looked at have we looked at actual costs and what the pros and cons are at all?
Well, you'll see the way the recommendation is worded. So the Commission recommends that following appropriate consultation with staff and stakeholders, serious consideration is given to dismantling the light client model. Now, so there's a caveat in there. You can see them from the way it's written. However, I don't believe that there would be a significant cost associated to changing that structure. We're simply changing the way we manage the system. In fact, if anything, it would probably become cheaper, because you would need more direct management rather than one set of people asking for things to happen and another set of people supposedly managing through those changes happening.
I understand you. I just want to talk about the implications for us recommending this.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask a similar question, but in fact that's made me almost change my question. Firstly, I just would say for the record as well, I'm conscious that I wasn't at the last meeting. I had an absolutely unavoidable work commitment, so it might be that this was discussed a bit more. But I wonder whether there is scope for the Commission, given what you've just said, to maybe probe that question a little bit further and try to understand the reason or the arguments why not. Because I distinctively think it seems like it would be clearly in the interests of the council and of our residents in particular for that to happen. And actually, if we were perhaps to put that question in this forum, it might be possible that we can make a stronger recommendation that it should happen rather than should just be thought about elsewhere.
That's a fair challenge. So what I would undertake to do then, I think, would be to write to probably senior officers and or cabinet member to just probe on that a little bit, and then depending on the answer I get back, make the change. What I'm proposing to do more generally with this report now is, at a certain point in the not too distant future, close the survey, gather the remaining evidence we need, and then send you a new draft final report, if you like, which you'll be able to comment on electronically. I don't think we need to wait until the next meeting, because I think you've got a solid understanding of the direction that we're going in with this report from what you've got in front of you. So I would ask those questions on that particular recommendation, make any changes that I think would be appropriate, and then send you the new version. If I need to give you a bit of commentary about any changes, I'll do that as well, so you know where I'm coming from. People okay with that general process? John?
Chair, that sounds like a good way forward to me. As you said, this is sort of the most substantial thing in terms of recommendations, and I think there's clear evidence, particularly in the reports back that you had in some of the more informal discussions, but I think it was apparent in some of the feedback that we had here as well. And it seems like a really good idea to ask management whether there are any sort of really strong reasons for not going down this, but it did seem, I thought, from the way in which we took SBS back in, that we were setting up on the basis of what we had before for dealing with outside contractors. It seems like there's got to be a more efficient solution for one organisation dealing with itself and what we've currently got to set up. So if we can strengthen that recommendation through those researchers, that would be brilliant.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So recommendation 2, it was clear in the interviews, and it also clear in the day I spent going around with the repair service, that there is no role for residents in verifying when a job is complete, and that was a recommendation that was made and accepted a number of years ago by the previous scrutiny of housing repairs. It seems to me that we cannot have a system, continue to have a system, whereby the only arbiter of whether or not something is done are the people who are directly delivering that service. Not because those people are motivated by the wrong things or deliberately trying to play the system, but simply because we need, I don't like using this phrase when we're talking about public services, but we need the customer to be able to say, yes, I have received the service that I need to receive. It's not going to be easy to do that, but other councils can do it, and I think we can do it as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think also the tenants are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, us as councillors, we often have that, dilemma. Did you communicate that it's a good idea, or was it done properly? But I think we're all on the same page. So I don't see why, there should be such a problem.
Okay. Chris?
I just think the frustration is that this is something that actually the Tenants Council have been saying for a long time, and it takes this sort of piece of work to actually say, yes, you're right.
Good, thank you. Well, it's still nice to hear that, though, in that that there's strong support for that from Tenants Council and from
But we
others.
should already know that because it's been said so many times.
Exactly.
This is true. Okay.
And it's how, I mean, obviously not for us to say how it's done, but it's, it needs to look at how we do this, because everyone's IT literate, and it's supposed to go on the computer to say yes, something can, but that's not for us to do.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so recommendation 3 is on the feedback from repairs. I spoke about this extensively in that first session when we interviewed the officers, which is that when we're doing the survey, we are always surveying people who've recently had a completed repair, and we're always missing the people who are stuck in the system. And the people we stuck in the system as councillors, when we knock on doors and talk to people and we have surgeries, that's when we meet the people who are stuck in the system. They've had repairs that have gone on, not sometimes for longer than weeks and months, but even years that they've been waiting. Those people are never surveyed at that point. Now, we had to recognise, because the council did try and do this before, but they found that they were simply kind of annoying people, because what they really wanted to do was get get it resolved. So the recommendation is to have a new key performance indicator which should be introduced, defining the number of unresolved incomplete repairs which are beyond the target completion time. Driving down this number should become a key priority for the service. So it's about identifying that group of people who are stuck in the system and putting strategic resource into driving down that number, so that we get less people saying, I've been waiting months and months and months for my boiler to be looked at, somebody came, they said that somebody would come back, nobody did come back. Yeah, Chris.
A question about the survey. When I looked at it, I thought it was actually quite intrusive, because it asks a number of questions, which it says if you don't want to answer, then don't answer. But I think if you're looking at a survey, it's quite off-putting. You know, they're actually asking quite intrusive questions about your sexuality. And is this a standard thing that goes out from the council?
Are we talking? I think in terms of the qualities monitoring part, I think that is a standard part of the way the council. So I think, to be fair, I think most public services do that, and I think there's generally agreed kind of standards around that kind of equalities monitoring thing.
Okay, I just, as I say, I think it is so intrusive that it might actually put people off from and I don't see what it proves, because if I'm saying I'm not going to complete that, I don't see what facts you get from asking for that information.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to say about this, again, I agree with it. I don't see why it's so difficult for the council to do, because we have things like the TripAdvisor or something. Oh, sorry. Sorry about this. How can I hide this? Yes, so we have TripAdvisor, all those things. You can go online, you can see people saying, oh, I'll never use this company again.
Yeah.
So can't we use it like that? Do you know what I mean? This is a great recommendation again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hamish.
This might not be a significant point, but it just strikes me reading this that I 100% welcome the suggestion that a key performance indicator be implemented, but I just wonder whether, as a sort of tightening of that, whether it might be worth tracking repairs or jobs that are at different stages beyond their target completion dates, and not just how many are outstanding or won't live in time, but also are there kind of a certain number of longer term
So a bit more detail.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me look at that. Okay. Jack?
Yeah, I suppose just mirroring what Hamish said, really. One of the things that, from my experience as a Faraday councillor and other councillors who have large council blocks will know, one of the problems that we have is that there isn't one service. So particularly for us, one of the things that creates a lot of confusion about when repairs are completed is the fact that we have the repairs service and we also have the leaks from above team who deal with slightly different parts of the problem, and what could end up being one repair job, say a leak from a flat in Taplow, will end up having the leaks from above team call to it who will stop the leak. But the issue is that that one job may create other jobs because of the way that the water runoff goes. And what I often find is that it's the people who are affected further down the line that have a lot of the problems that aren't being resolved. So it's the flats a couple of floors down that have ended up being flooded. They're the ones that aren't being solved because the initial job is being done as completed. And to be fair to the leaks from above team or whatever, it is completed because there's no longer a leak. So is there somewhere, and I was looking through the recommendations and I was struggling to find a way to work it into one, or whether it was something that we would need a fresh recommendation, that those two parts of the service need to have a look at how they're working together for the more complex jobs. And I don't know whether it's kind of Hamish's thing, do you add in stages? I think the idea of having another KPI is really good. I don't know, I don't have any answers to that. It's just a problem that I've come across quite a lot.
Yeah, I support that, because I've come across some cases, but I mean, one particular one where you have a blockage in somebody's flat, be it the toilet or the wash hand basin, whatever. The plumber will come along, I can't unblock it anymore, I've done the best I can, and the reason I can't do it anymore is because it's gone down communal pipe, which is a different team apparently.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
so
Okay, that's
So again, I don't know if us to do, I think it's us to put down this.
Let me see. Let me have a think about that. It's a fair point, and I'll see if we can either change the wording or add a recommendation in on that point when I do the redraft. But I've got a note of that. So on recommendation 4, so the survey is useful, and I think the way the survey has been done is honest and is in an honest attempt to try and get feedback from completed repairs. I found it striking that we were doing 800 a month, 800 surveys a month. There's a lot of resource time on the phone doing 800 a month. And I just asked myself the question, do we need 800 in order to get a statistically accurate sample of what's actually going on? If we did 400 and then put that additional resource into resolving problem repairs which have been identified via other means, such as complaints or counsellor casework, would that not be a better use of resources? I've tested this out with a couple of people already, and they think actually, yeah, this is we could probably do this. We'd still have a useful survey. We'd still be getting that feedback, but actually we'd be able to maybe sort out some of those repairs. So that's the reason behind that. Yeah.
Can I just ask again, what is how many people does it take to get out the surveys? Or what time? I don't know.
So it's done through this is from memory from what they said. It's done through the call centre. So essentially, you've got people at the call centre who are sat waiting for calls, and for a lot of the time when they're not doing taking calls, they will instead then start doing the survey, and then they will use that time. Well, if we took a small team of people off and went for the problem repairs instead, would that be a better use of their time? I think probably it would. Yeah.
Can I just ask what are those surveys as a percentage of the number of repair jobs that are being raised each month? Because the biggest thing around statistical accuracy is actually the percentage size of the sample.
Yeah.
So is halving it from 800 to 400 drastically reducing the percentage of repairs,
okay.
or is it? I don't know.
Let me test that. It's a fair question.
So it's about generally accepted statistical standards.
Yeah.
I will find out and check on that. Because we don't want people questioning the reliability of the statistics by taking that resource out. So pay incentives. Now you'll see a big in the conclusion part of this underneath pay incentives, the big caveat at the start, which is it's clearly not our role to go in and start making specific recommendations about people's terms and conditions and pay at work, and that's something that should be done via negotiation between the employer and the recognised trade unions. However, I think it did come up in numerous different areas of evidence gathering that the particular type of pay incentives that are currently in place are causing some issues with service delivery, and at times are prompting perverse behaviours because of the incentives that are there. The one thing in particular that came up when I was doing the going around with the repair service was I was told about certain job codes are seen as absolute golden jobs, and if you get one, you're sorted, because they actually take 25 minutes to do usually, and yet the job code is allocated 4 hours against it.
Yes,
So
no, that's true. I mean, I had the same thing.
and you had the same
when I went out.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. It can't carry on.
no, and I think we've collected that evidence. We can't ignore it. So the recommendation you can see is done in very general terms, and does also recognise the need for negotiation with trade unions. But that those issues do need to be dealt with. The what happens next cards, I recall officers saying that this is actually something that was introduced, and I think this goes back to our like client model. It was introduced, but then is now a practice routinely ignored. It's something that's stopped happening. The cards are designed to give the residents certainty over what happens next, literally, so somebody's come around, they've done a bit of a job, perhaps, the bit that they can do, or maybe, and they whilst they're in the person's home, they ring the call centre, they plan in the next job, and then they write down on the card when the next appointment is coming. They arrange that with the person there and then, and the residents I spoke to who had used these in the past said actually this is a good thing. There's some stuff coming in on the survey already about the what happens next cards, which I've seen, and I think it's something that does need to happen. It's a good example of, you know, if we're managing the service directly ourselves, that we would just say, look, you're not going to not implement this. This is something that has to happen.
I totally agree with that. I mean, how many times have we been told, look, somebody came to do this repair, they promised them to come back again in a week. It's been a month now. And I say, well, why haven't you changed it? Oh, we have, but you know. So totally agree again. Good recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, specialisation in the call centre. This came up both in terms of going round with the repairs operatives who said to me, look, I often get to jobs, and the job that's been described to me on the information that's been sent through on the phone is not the same as the job that I'm actually going to have to do. So I haven't got the right parts, I haven't got the right tools, and I'm not able to complete the repair. And the reason given for that is, in the words of the people who spoke to me, were that often the people who are taking the calls don't understand well enough the detail of the kind of jobs that need to be done. And where that tallies with is the evidence that we heard from officers that there was often not enough specialisation around the people taking the call, so they didn't have that level of understanding. They went and sat with people taking calls in the call centre, the senior officers here at Southwark Council, and they were very surprised that people taking repairs calls were suddenly then switched on to some other service, right? And so they were dotting around, they were doing repairs, then they do something else, and then they do something else. And that shouldn't be happening. We should have a dedicated, specialised repairs call centre, and that's what that recommendation is trying to get to, try and overcome some of those problems. Multi-skilling training, this was something that was mentioned when I went to Islington and spoke to them. That's something that they've introduced, which they found very beneficial. It reduces the number of times that an operative goes out to a call, exactly the example you've just given, which is where, I do this set of jobs, and I can't do those other things. Now, of course, there will need to be specialists in areas that's the way that those trades work, but we could be much more multi-skilled in the way that our repairs operatives work, and that would reduce the number of times we have to go back to properties in order to properly complete jobs. So introducing that training as a recommendation as well.
Can I just also add
Yeah.
that when I was out with my repairs chappie, another issue was that he didn't have the right communal keys. So again, he said that I've asked for the keys, but I'm told that it's too expensive for each one of us to have the communal keys to get into the water tank in the loft area there.
Right, okay.
So I don't know if that can be incorporated.
Yeah, let me ask about that. Yeah. Okay.
Are there any other comments or additions that people want to make at this stage, bearing in mind that I am going to send this around again, redrafted and added to following the survey results? Chris?
I've just got a question about an item that came to the last Tenants Council that was circulated, we haven't seen it before, about a consultancy that's been brought in called Housemark.
Okay.
Housemark is a leading not-for-profit consultancy operating within the social housing sector and working with organisations to improve services and deliver improved value for money. London Borough of Southwark has appointed Housemark to support its review of the repair service set out across 3 phases, and then it outlines.
Okay.
It caused a lot of anger at Tenants Council because it was the very first time we'd heard about it. There's no consultation with tenants when this happened. We asked what the cost of it was because it felt a bit like the last consultancy that we weren't consulted about, the Kaizen report. When we asked for the cost, we were told we couldn't be given it. Where has this come from? Why has it never been scrutiny, not considered it? This consultancy is there now, and it caused. I mean, some of our representatives actually walked out because they just felt, here we go again. We're spending money on things that I speaking to someone who actually works in the repairs department, said this was work that actually, if we thought it through properly, could have been done in-house anyway. Can the scrutiny committee ask how much this consultancy has cost him? Why there has been no consultation before it was actually appointed?
I can find that out, because I can ask the question. So leave it with me. It was not something I was aware of. So
But if you look at the agenda, it's a tenant council
Yeah,
agenda
yeah.
item.
Okay. I think you've given me the details to ask the question, so I can do that. Thank you.
And sorry, Chair, just to ask if you could report that back to the whole
Yeah, yeah.
committee as well, that would be interesting. And I wasn't aware of that either, so I'd be grateful to hear more.
Okay. Anything else people want to add at this stage? Obviously, look out for the email, and please do give me any other comments you got once we. I'm expecting 3 or 4 other recommendations based on what we see in the survey, Chris.
Yeah, just one more question about have the SGTO contributed anything to the?
Not yet, but it would be good to get something from
Because I know
them.
we want to do that.
Yeah, so if you could prompt them to do that, would be really helpful. Thank
Okay,
you. Yeah.
Sorry, I know this is just a draft.
Mm.
I presume you will be listing the people who've taken part in this, like the GPO and different other ladies. Homeowners council, these people have taken part.
Yeah. If people want to be listed and the lights are going out, we can give them a message.
And then it's a phone thing.
Yeah.
Do we not business call repairs as well?
Now, we did request that several times and was told that we were going to be sent to us, but they were never sent to us. So time kind of defeated us a little bit on that one.
That's fine.
Yeah, good point. Well spotted. Okay.
Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one final question, if I may, and we may end up not having time for it. But one thing that, again, this is coming from my ward experience, one kind of dark spot that the repair service has, as far as certainly as Faraday Ward councils are concerned, is the way in which the repair service interacts with temporary accommodation residents who are in void properties. Because as I understand it, there is actually just a completely different process for how they deal with repairs that don't go through the normal repairs service. And I was wondering if there was any way the Commission would have time to look into that, assess what the structure is, because we have a large number of temporary accommodation residents in void properties, and that number's not going to go down.
Okay.
So
Let me ask.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So
Let me ask that question, Chris.
Could I just say that's something else that the SGTO has been looking at of great concern.
good,
And sending capital as well.
really. Yeah. Okay, definitely. I will look at that and we'll try and add something.
In on that basis. Okay, people okay with proceeding on that basis?
Yes.
Look out for the follow-up report, and we'll try and get it agreed on email ASAP and get it to Cabinet ASAP as well. Okay, so I think that kind of brings us to the close of the meeting. Thanks everyone, it's been really useful. And one other thing, our future meeting. So we did have one in the diary for the 27th of January, which I would suggest was the original date of this meeting, but we brought this one forward. Yeah, so that is now not going to happen on the 27th, I would suggest, and that I think we should try and schedule in a meeting towards the end of February, start of March. We haven't got a precise date yet. Fitz and I have only just discussed it. People okay with that as a kind of timing for the next meeting?
Yeah, because if I could just say, I've got it in my diary for the 27th.
Yeah.
I had something else socially planned for tonight, and yeah, I do sometimes. I thought I must have got it wrong. I mean, it's not helpful because we set it in our diary, so we plan around it.
No, fair. And, apologies about this evening, but I hope you can rearrange for the 27th now, Chris, because you've got a free night now. As soon as we can, we'll get that new date to you. So again, look out for that. Thanks again.